My name is Cheria, and for a living, I turn workplaces into growth spaces. This podcast is a front row seat into my own personal and professional development as I talk with inspiring people about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. Welcome to Grow There with Cheria. If you have ever worked with me, or your team has ever worked with me, your company has ever worked with me, chances are we talked about workplace resilience. I have a love-hate relationship for the topic, and yet I've become obsessed with workplace resilience and understanding what resilience is all about. And one of the things I've been geeking out on lately is this growing body of research that shows that resilience is contagious. When we are around someone who's highly resilient and we're watching them go through a difficult challenge and they do it with calm and adaptability and optimism, what happens is we actually have our own mirror neurons light up. And this means that our nervous system actually begins to mimic or model itself after what we're seeing in another person. And it's basically unconscious. And I love the idea of resilience being contagious. And I was talking with our guest today. And as I was talking with her, I thought, oh my gosh, first of all, she's one of the most resilient people I know based on the stories that she's going to tell today. And it is rubbing off on me. I feel stronger and more capable and ready to go take the world by storm when I listen to her talk. So I am really excited to introduce you to our guest. When we recorded this episode, Puja Vohra was the executive vice president of marketing for Paramount Plus and Showtime. There, she led the efforts for Paramount Plus and Showtime originals and live championship sports such as Halo, Lioness, the Dexter franchise, 1883, the Star Trek franchise, Dora, Paw Patrol, Yellow Jackets, The Shy. Oh my gosh, I have some client crossover there, which is so cool. Fellow Travelers, Billions, NFL, and the UEFA Champions League, and so much more. I mean, that repertoire alone just blows my mind. Puja is a seasoned executive with more than 2 decades of experience working with leading brands. Literally, she's worked with everyone. BSE Global, True TV, which is a division of Warner Media, Oxygen Media, and for all my Bravo lovers out there, because I know you're there, she also held roles at Bravo Media, making a splash with several successful launches, including early seasons of Project Runway, Top Chef, and the Real Housewives franchise. And these are just her roles in America. Just a few weeks ago, Puja announced that she has joined the Fox Corporation in a newly created role as the Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Vice President of Advertising Sales, where she will lead strategy across the entire Fox portfolio. Puja is a wonder, and I can't wait for her to share her stories with you, and I can't wait for her resilience to rub off on you. So without further ado, it's time to grow there with Puja Vohra. Well, Puja, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for saying yes to this. This is quite an honor.
I'm so excited. A friend of Ross is a friend of mine, and I'm so glad I got introduced to you. And I really love what you're trying to do. So happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. I know. I feel like Ross has connected me with a bunch of people for the podcast, which is amazing because we all know Ross loves to amplify folks' voices and
He knows everyone, and he knows
it
everyone.
knows everyone. And now I feel like everyone on this podcast now knows Ross so well, one from season 1 and now because we have to talk about him now for several episodes of this season.
I think we should do a 6 degrees of Ross.
Oh my gosh, we should. That's so
Ross
good.
is the new Kevin Bacon. So
He really is. He really is. Oh my gosh. Well, Pooja, I am just so excited for you to be here because when we first met, I just felt like I told Ross this the other day. I said, I just really want to be her friend. Like there's just so much about you and so much richness to the life that you've lived. And I'm excited for you to be able to share a little part of that today. So, you know why we're here. I am really interested in people sharing with me stories about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. And I want to hear a story from you about a time when something in your personal life really impacted your professional life and how you grew from it, or vice versa, how something in your professional life impacted your personal life, and how you grew from it. And tell me the whole story and everything that you learned. So
Yeah.
I'll just get out of the way and let you share what feels right today.
So I consider myself extremely lucky because I have been blessed to have had such incredible support from my family, from people that I've worked with, from my countries, like my country of birth and my country now of, citizenship and residence in the US. So I just feel so proud to have had so many experiences. And it's interesting. I went through this exercise where somebody said, talk about the highs in your life and talk about the lows in your life and map your journey. We did this exercise recently. And I really struggled because the lows are actually the highs, because I think that when you are sometimes at your worst, or you have the worst luck, or you are in the hardest time of your life, that is almost where all of the learning and growth comes from. And so that has been my experience. So the piece I wanted to share with you, and it's a piece that I'm sure is accessible and relatable to so many people. So I came to this country as an immigrant in my late adulthood. I was 27 or 28, I think, when I came here, and I can't quite remember. I came here in 99. And I used to work in India. I went to business school in India. I grew up middle class ish. But my father, over time, was in the government, and he had a lot of, he started to get a lot of access. And so I grew up with a lot of, great privilege, I think, in education, and went to an excellent business school. That's when I met my husband, my now husband. But at some point in my life, I really felt that I had to come to the United States. I used to work in media in India after business school, and I was doing really well. I was quite successful. I was working at MTV, and we were a small group. We were a fast growing group. I'm still in touch with all of them. And so I decided to come to the United States, and I kind of almost decided to, I don't want to say on a whim, but it was a very spontaneous decision. I wasn't very planned out with it. I didn't really have a place to live when I came here. I stayed with this lady, Dana, I can't remember her second name, who I met, I'm kidding, not kidding, on a train station in India. And I invited her to come and stay at home with me in India. She was backpacking through India, and she stayed with us for a week, 10 days. We had a lovely connection. And then she said, come stay with me if you ever come to the US. And I think a few months later, I was like, actually, I'm going to come, and can I come and
Wow.
crash in your house? And that's when I first learned about plant-based milk, because I think she drink almond milk. This is in 99 or something. So anyway, for Indians, that's like, I need regular milk with tea. Um,
Yeah.
but I came here to go to school, and I joined something called the New School. But very quickly I realized that the school was not for me. It was a wonderful group of people, but I had already been to a really good business school in India, and
Hmm.
it feel like, it was expensive to go to school here. It was, I can't remember how much per credit. I was like, there's no way I can keep this up, because when I came here with almost no money, and I
Hmm.
came here not knowing anybody. I didn't really have family here. The girl I was staying with was a friend I had just met a few months ago. And so very quickly, I decided, I think a few weeks into school, I said, this is not for me. Like, I really need to get out and start to make a living and start to live in the real world, because I cannot afford to spend 2 or 3 years in school, rack up a ton of debt. And then I don't know if there's going to be work after that. And I had
Yeah.
already a big business degree in India, like a really good business degree. So I really reduced my credits down. This was pre 9/11. So they were the schools were not as strict at the time in terms of what would keep your status. And I kind of just launched out on my own. I left school. I got a job in a coffee shop in Brooklyn. I was washing dishes I used to get there at 6 a.m. and I think be done at noon. I moved to Brooklyn. That was the first time I moved to Brooklyn, because it was much cheaper than living in the city. I used to bike everywhere. I couldn't afford to take the subway. So I used to bike everywhere. I still have the bike. I bought it for $65 on Court Street. And I was the fittest I'd ever been, because you are exercising all day long, biked over the Brooklyn Bridge at 3 in the morning. And again, that's what I mean about the privilege of being blessed that terrible things didn't happen to me. Like I really, so many chances. You know, I didn't really think as much about physical security as probably I should have. I would never let my daughter do any of those things anymore. But I learned so much in that time. And it was a hard, I think it was like at least 2.5 years. In that same time, I tried to do a startup. I joined this guy who used to live in Brooklyn who was doing a internet radio startup. I then left everything. I moved to Seattle to work in some other startup. I remember again biking in Seattle because I didn't have a car. I remember biking up those hills was insane.
Mm,
Uh, I then that didn't work out. I then moved to San Francisco. I crashed at a friend's house. And again, this is a story that I know many people have this story. It's not unique to me. I think what was unique to me when I think about it at the time was I was much older. I wasn't doing this in my early 20s or, coming out of
mm,
college, doing this after that. I had a business degree. I had had two good jobs in India, one at Seagram and one at MTV India. I had a pretty good life. I used to fly around the world and, attend conferences. And my
mm,
father, I would talk to him, and this is different times. And I don't know if we had cell phones. I can't remember. But he'd be like, "Why aren't you just coming back? Like, come back to India. You are so stable here. You will be absolutely fine. This is hard. I hear what you're doing. It is really hard."
mm,
Um, he was obviously worried for me, but I just couldn't. I could not go back. I
mm.
felt I felt it would be a failure if I went back to India without having made it in the media business. That was my dream. I came here to work at the center of the universe, like which in my mind was
Yeah.
Times Square and 1515 Broadway, and that's
Mm,
where the MTV offices were. And eventually I met my husband whom I had known from many years ago, and we got married and I got a green card. And even then, it took me, I don't know, a year and a half to get my first job because
mm,
at that point was legal, I could work, but nobody, and I absolutely understand it in hindsight, nobody believed in me. I was not from here. I hadn't gone to school here. I didn't have a network. I didn't have the cultural cachet of like, what does it
mm.
up in the US and the cereal you ate or the cartoons you saw in the afternoon or and I had none of that.
Yeah.
I till I married my husband, I couldn't even afford to have a television. So the way I think eventually when I got my first job, I think I was like doing research on the TV shows in the New York Public Library. So then I could talk well about all of that. So I just think it was a tricky time. And again, thank goodness for the goodness of people. I knew this one gentleman in MTV Asia. His name was Dick Sewell. He was a salesperson. And when I came here, he gave me 5 names. And he said, I know these 5 guys. They're all in the art sales marketing world. And you should talk to them. And I wrote, one was at Discovery, one was at Turner, one was at Fox, maybe. There was 2 other
Mm,
people, like their names. And I used those names. And from those names, I probably had like 50-ish information interviews,
mm,
and net interviews, so to speak. And persevered like crazy. The person who eventually got me the connection to my first job, Richard Chamberlain, I used to keep emailing him. He would not respond. I get it. He was busy. And I'm like, I really just love to see you. And eventually I said to him, I said, can I take the subway with you? I said, I will come to your house. I will walk with you to your subway stop. I will take the subway with you to the office and then I will leave. So I will
mm.
not take any more of your time. And that's when he responded. And he said, oh my God, like, I don't think anybody has had that.
Yeah.
So he met me and he eventually connected me to Karen Bronzo at Oxygen, who gave me my first job. So I guess I say that it was a long story, but when I look back now, I don't quite understand what kept me going. I don't know how, because when I got to the US, I had a very successful life in India. I could walk into a restaurant, I had credit cards,
Yeah.
I lived a very successful life in India. And at a very young age in India, I had gotten a fair amount of success. But I think coming here and being absolutely humbled, not only at that time, being an immigrant, being a diverse woman who had not grown up here, it was very hard to walk into rooms. it was
Mm.
very hard to feel comfortable. It was very hard to form connections because there was just this barrier of, I don't know where you're from. You don't sound like me. I'm not that interested in your world. I'm sure you're great, but I don't like that was what and I sometimes feel that today. It is still hard. You go into rooms there where you might be the only one that looks like yourself or
Yeah.
talks, and you've got to sometimes work extra hard, twice, thrice as hard to say, I belong, I am valuable, I can help you, I know what I'm doing. Um, so that continues to be the journey, I guess, 20 ish years later. But I think the things that I learned from that time was just like utmost resilience and
Mm.
utmost belief in myself, and somehow knowing, like, not knowing where the journey was going to end, but I guess somehow having the conviction of my passions or the conviction in my, I don't know, in my belief in myself that I would somehow make it through. And I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I didn't have a master plan. I did not have a master plan. It was survival, and it was somehow I need to get a job in the media business. Like, I need to get my foot in the door, even if it's an assistant, if it's an admin, I'll work at the reception, I'll work in the whatever kitchen facilities, like any way to just get my door. Because somehow I think I felt or knew that once I had a foot in, I would be able to demonstrate that I could do it, that I had
Yeah.
it in, that I would be able to learn, what I had to learn. And it's funny, even at the coffee shop, I worked at the coffee shop where eventually I went from dishwasher to barista, and it used to be the Fall Cafe on Smith Street. And when I took the job, Henry, who was the owner, I was like, "Do you know how to make coffee? Like, you know how to make espresso?" And I was like, "Oh, I've got it. I know how to." Of course, had never done it before, and did it. I remember the Sri Lankan lady who helped me said, "Don't worry, I've got it. I'll give you all. I'll tell you how all of this works." It was not that hard. And when I was leaving the Fall Cafe eventually to move to San Francisco, he was like, "Oh, you were like the best barista I ever had." And being on the other side of like people coming in and placing orders, and you say, "Do you want this or that?" And they don't understand what you're saying, and because they don't understand the accent,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
you repeat yourself, and I held on very hard to how I sounded.
Mhm.
I still do. I care deeply about where I came from, and I want to make it on my own terms. I wanted to make
Yeah.
it on my own terms. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was just like, this is who I am, and this is some, now they all the books will tell you, like, be unique, be yourself. You are special. But thank God that I had that feeling in me.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was, that I could survive and I could succeed. So that was, I guess I got my first job in 2003, like my first official paying job in 2003. So I was here about, yeah, like about 4 or maybe 2002, like about 3, 4 years before I got my first job. Uh,
Wow.
yes, but
You
it was,
know,
yeah,
I my mind is blown. Okay, it's funny when you talk about you so casually say, that my story is not unique. And on one hand, I see that there are so many people who have immigrated to this country who have just done so much to they've had to overcome so much to make it here and to
yeah,
build the life that they dreamed of. So on one hand, yes, I see that. On another hand, I'm like, Puja, no, this is incredibly unique. No, like who does this? Who goes from a life that is stable and you're traveling the world, you're doing incredible work, to choosing to come here to start all over again. I know people do it, but to
yeah,
hear it from your mouth and, I have never done that. And I think it's remarkable. What I hear so loud and clear is radical belief in yourself. And I think that is something that so many people are trying to figure out how to establish for themselves because they have all these hopes and dreams of things that they know that they can do or at least really desire to do, but
mm,
don't have that radical belief in themselves
yeah.
that I think, I want to ask you, like, do you think that's something that you can develop or do you think it's just something you're born with?
It's a great question. I have to believe it is something you can develop. I think, um, I think I say this to my daughter now who, oh, how should I say, kind of, not just second guesses herself, but struggles with confidence. And even though she is an incredible, incredible person and, musician and student and human, but I think that you've got to know that when people are saying to you that you can't do this or you don't have it, that situation may not be the right person. I mean, give it all you've got, but you will be right for another situation. Just when people kind of come, not even come at you, but when people try and pull you down, and sometimes deliberately, but sometimes so often not deliberately, that's their journey and that's their issues. And try and have a shield around you. Like, know that that is going to happen. Just that awareness. Don't expect,
Yeah.
open arms and everybody supporting you. But somebody said to me, when somebody throws a ball at you, it's your choice whether or not you take the ball or you take the ball, you look at it and you can put it away. You don't have to hold on to what somebody threw your way and said in meaning, you don't have it in you, you don't, you're not good enough for this or that. And I think just kind of trying to think about every piece of feedback, especially the hard feedback, as an opportunity to get better or stronger and to kind of like really use it to observe yourself and see what. And I'm certainly, I'm not young tradition in the traditional sense anymore, but I think I continue to feel there is so much that I can get better at or take feedback on. Or my husband is one of my hardest champions and my harshest critics.
Mm,
um that is helpful, you
mm,
know, even though I can get really upset and say, just support me. But then you're like, no, you're totally right. I messed that up, or I didn't know how to do that, or
mm.
I do that better. So yeah, I think each one of us has the ability to do immense things.
Yes. Yeah.
No question about it. It's just what we think we want to go for and how we get there,
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's so powerful. We are a limitless possibilities, to your point,
Yeah.
each one of
Yeah.
us. And what you are demonstrating, what you have demonstrated through your life is also that you don't have to commit to one path and just invest everything into that one path. You can actually disrupt your life to look for even greater growth and even
Yeah.
greater sense of self-actualization. To me, as I was listening to you, I think that that internal driver is something that you had to have had a relationship with in
Hmm.
order to keep doing what you were doing, in
Hmm.
order to keep going. And I think so often it's not that in some ways, sometimes it's not that we don't believe in ourselves. In some ways, we don't have a relationship with the driver inside of us that
Right.
wants to do those
Right.
things.
Right.
And, now I see your career and all of the adventures that you've had in your career and I mean, just iconic
Absolutely. Lucky.
cultural moments that you've been a part of. And none of that would have been possible if you hadn't been willing to disrupt your life and
Take
do
my shot
whatever.
and
Yeah,
take what
exactly. Shoot your
and
shot.
my
Exactly.
and the two
Uh,
things I would say, just and three quick things. One is I am so grateful to not just my family, but where I came from. I think India is an incredible country where you there is this insane drive, because if you're not good, you are no one. Like,
yeah,
it is really this difference between sometimes survival. So I
yeah.
do feel very lucky that that was built into me just from the culture that I came from, like hard work and relentless hard work. I'm grateful that I came to America, because I think America is a country and I think it is very, very special, where I think merit counts, hard work counts, can break through. I think there isn't a class system uh, the way it is in many, many countries. So I think that is huge. And then I would just say I'm so thankful. And it's funny in some ways, it's a lot of men. male mentors and sponsors who
Mm.
got where I am. They had no business understanding me. They had no business being my champions. You
Mm.
know, I think about, I mean, David Levy, Michael Engelman, who was my last boss at Showtime.
Mm.
Ross has taken such an interest in helping me on my path. Chris Lynn, who was my boss at True TV, and of course, Karen Bronzo, who gave me my first shot ever in the business. So
Mm.
I'm so, and I'm missing out. I'm missing so many more people. David Nevins from Showtime. People who really took a chance on you and understood where you were coming from. And even though we were not the same, we did not
Mm.
have the same. I'm not a big like I don't speak sports the way most people speak sports because I didn't grow up with
Yeah.
American sport. You
Yeah.
know, but the language of humanity and hard work and I don't know, authenticity, it can
Yes.
bridge many, many gaps.
Yes.
So I think that's why going back to try and be yourself, try and, don't be embarrassed of who you are, stand for something, stand for what you believe in, and you
Mm.
will find your people. Like you
Yes.
will and put yourself out there. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to reach out or try. You can't just be in a corner and then hope that somebody will. But the power of the people who have helped me and continue to help me is incredible. So
Gosh, I really appreciate you saying that. I wanted to actually come back to you mentioned the person that gave you the name of Five Guys.
right,
And
right.
there were a couple of things that went off in my head. One was I just thought I want to be the type of person who gives
Yeah,
someone the name of five
yeah,
people to go and
yeah,
talk to.
yeah,
That
yeah.
that is one of my greatest joys is to be able to connect people um and to support them and that I just want to say that to people listening, like be the person who's connecting others, helping others along. And sometimes that is as simple as let me connect you with this person. And I think that is so powerful. And then I also, it's interesting that you talk about men having been advocates for you. And I
Yeah.
think there's such a large conversation going on right now about masculinity and femininity in the
Sure.
workforce, what I won't tackle that here, but I like to think of, and this is gonna sound a little woo-woo, I like to think about what it would look like if the workplace had the divine feminine and the divine masculine really working. And
Mhm.
when I think about what you're talking about, these men stepping up to advocate for you, that's such a beautiful divine masculine move. And that is, I think, really one of the superpowers of the divine masculine is
Yeah.
being able to support people, and in particular, women in saying, "Let me help you step more
Absolutely.
into who you are and into what you're capable. Let me actually see you and
Yeah.
then promote you." That
Yeah.
is such a valuable thing. So I think that everyone can learn from that, but I also kind of wanna speak to the men listening that, like, that's a very
And
special thing that men can do for
see,
women.
and I think in my world, in my corporate life, of men in the senior roles are often male dominated. That is the fact of our
Yep.
of our times, and that it is changing, but it is very male dominated. And I have actually found, and I mean, it may not make me, I don't know, it may come across the wrong way, and that's not my intention. That often I find women can be more insecure because there are such few women that they
Mm,
feel it is one against the other you
mm,
know but
mm.
somehow I have found, and I'm speaking generally, and it's
Sure,
not,
sure.
it's of course there are many, many exceptions to the rule. And I've certainly been the beneficiary of many women, people that I know that Bravo, Lisa Shah and Ellen Stone have been wonderful partners to me. Jason Klarman was also at Bravo. I mean, there's so many names that I can, Bill Koenigsberg at Horizon, Mike Benson at CBS. So many people. It takes so many people to
Yeah.
help. But I think the one thing I will say to everyone, and I learned this lesson in some article, there is a difference between mentors and sponsors.
Mm,
Mentors are people. again, doesn't, gender neutral, doesn't matter, men or women, who can give you advice, who can help sort things out. You're at a crossroads. They can talk about their own experiences. You can learn from them. Sponsors are people who can actually do things for you.
Yeah.
A sponsor is a person who can take you from here and put you here, can say, I see that in you. I'm going to give you more. So a sponsor is mostly in your own organization, somebody more senior to you, not your boss necessarily. Usually it's a couple of people above, a couple of layers above, or it's peers of your bosses in different divisions or different groups. But they are the ones who are sitting in rooms that you're not in.
Yes.
And opportunities come up, they're the ones that are like, okay, I'm going to see if Pooja can take that on. And
Listen.
I'm beneficiary of that time and time again. So I think for people to think about sponsors and how to truly nurture and find those relationships, because sponsors know you can help me. I look at, you can do this and you're going to help me in my vision for the company, my
Mm.
division, my department. So it's people sometimes confuse the two, and they are very different things.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's just so good to look at your life and take stock of what you do have. Do you have mentors? Do you have sponsors? Do you have advocates?
Yep.
Do you have that person like you're describing your husband who also can be the antagonist at times,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
and push back, it's kind of like,
Right.
well, you're a pain in my ass, but okay,
Right.
sometimes I
I
need
need
that.
I need that.
Yeah,
I need that
absolutely.
smart mirror, you know? So, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I want to go back to your story, and if one, I just so moved by it, and I know you have so many stories. Um, but I'm curious if you were to name the growth that took place from you coming here later in life and starting life over and then building this career. What would you say is the biggest growth lesson? Like, how would you summarize it?
It's a great question. I think the thing I became, I don't know if it was always, I always had it, but I realized it, I think was just, being relentless. It's a fully nuanced word. It's not all positive. There's edges to it. There's
Mhm.
harshness to it, you know. Um, but that's the reality of tough experiences,
Mm,
you know. And I do think there was an incredible growth in confidence.
mm,
But I know that that came as an outcome. In some ways, the luck I had of good education when I was growing up, a stable family structure, support from my parents, the ability, I spoke English, which allowed me to be comfortable in most parts of the world.
yeah.
Um, so I had that. I think then there was this insane fire inside that did not let me go, even at the harshest of times, the hardest of times of like no money. I mean, I didn't have life insurance. I didn't have, sorry, health insurance when I was in this country for the first 3 years. And I would just keep $1,000 in my bank. Like I could not touch it no matter what. Because
Mm,
if anything happened in my bike, I had to get on a flight and go home. I knew that I could
mhm.
not go to a hospital here, you know. Um, so yeah, so I think there was this relentless need or urge to prove to myself that I could do it. And then when I did, and it took a while, I think it really gave me the confidence, the platform. And once especially I made my way into my first job, and I did really well at my first job. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I can do this. And then it was, and I don't remember the phrase, a friend of mine had said it to me. It's kind of like you always rise to the bottom of your next incompetence or something. I forget
Mhm.
what way of saying you grow, but then you're at the bottom of your next hill. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
bottom of hill. And it's not always that the hills are all around skills or the hills are all around functional knowledge. It could be hills around, um, you know, internal transformation or leadership growth, or I don't know, being a more 360 person in your day to day. Like it just could be any kind of
Yeah.
transformation. But you do something, you get through it. And the one other thing I'll say, which holds me Um, and I don't think I even finished the book, but Glennon Doyle, one of the books that she wrote, can't
Mhm.
remember which it was called, Untamed, I can't remember.
Mhm.
And she said, it's like in the first few pages, first 30, 40 pages, where she said her hardest times are where she sees the most growth. And when you're in it, you don't get it. You're like, I cannot deal with this. I don't know what's going on. I can't do this anymore. But get through it, get through it, get through it. One more day, one more second, one more hour, one more meeting, one more interview, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Other side, and you look back and you're like, whoa, that was powerful.
Yeah.
That was, I'm so glad that I went through that. It's kind of like you get stretched as a rubber band and it's a bigger rubber band.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's so interesting because, I work in the world of corporate culture. I do a lot of training around resiliency
mhm,
um and you are basically speaking the thesis of what we talk about all the time, and we really wish that we didn't have to be resilient in
mm,
this life. We wish that we things could just be easy. And
yeah,
yet whenever I talk to people about the things they're most proud of, the work they're most proud of, things they accomplish that bring them the most sense of fulfillment, it
right.
is never something that came easy. It is
Yeah,
always something that took an incredible amount of work and labor to get to. And
yeah,
so that is in so many ways why I'm doing this podcast, because growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life is almost always bringing up some kind of challenge or conflict or issue that you have to deal with. And then we get to look at it on the other side and realize, wow,
absolutely.
I
I
was
do.
made through that
Yeah.
experience.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, I do kind of bringing it into work a little bit. And we did this a little bit when we talked about, men in the workplace and how we can amplify voices. But I'm curious, based on your story, and it could be anything, if you were to give advice to business leaders or businesses in general on how your growth can teach them something about how to better navigate their cultures or nourish their organizational cultures, what would it be?
It's a great question again. This is all, and again, personal to me, but I hope relatable to some. So I talked mostly about the beginning of my life here, and now I'll talk about something that's way more recent. I was at Showtime. I loved being there. It was an incredible place to work at. And I think maybe a year and a half or 2 years in, I started to just feel like that I was not showing up, yeah, to be the best leader that I could be.
Mm,
And I felt it more because of some of the conversations I was having with my direct reports. And you can feel that things were not quite right. And we had gone through a lot of change. And again, I'm relentless, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I put a lot of pressure on my team. But I also I really want, the some of the most joy I get is when people that I have worked with or that work with me have more success, that develop, into stronger leaders or take on more than they've taken on. I love putting people in the spotlight who were not in the spotlight before. And so I remember sitting down, and there was a few people, and I'm sure if they're listening to this, they'll know who they are. But Danny and Colleen and Jen Gatto, and I remember having these conversations, and so I basically decided that I needed to really have some very vulnerable, transparent conversations with these individuals to say, am I sensing something? Like, how can I be better? I don't think I'm showing up in the best way possible. And listen, all of us, and I continue to be and will continue to be till the day I die, are all works in progress. And
yeah.
we have a lot of flaws. I am extremely flawed as an individual, as a leader, as a marketer. Um, and I cannot fix it all, but I'm trying to be as aware as possible about my weaknesses. And so I sat down with them separately, and I tried to understand what I was doing wrong. And they all said different versions of the same thing, and I really appreciate them for being so honest with me. It was very humbling. And I think it was that I, uh, that I only focused on what wasn't working. that I did not take enough time to think about or to give thanks for or gratitude for or recognize how far they had come on a certain project and a certain effort. But I immediately would get to like, okay, here's what's not working. And the way I thought about it was like, well, that's my job.
Mm,
When I say something, it's my job to say, here's all the things that we could do better with it. And I translated it. Thankfully, the penny dropped for me so loudly because I realized I was doing the same thing at home. I was doing
mm,
the same thing with my daughter, who at the time was, now she's 16. So at the time she was 12, 13. Very,
mm,
very, such a vulnerable age. And I realized that that's what I was doing to her as well, where
mm.
I would only focus on how she could be better, how she could be stronger or smarter or harder working or do her music better or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And I it was such a difficult time because I kind of went through almost this like, I don't want to say hatred, self hatred, that's a strong word, but just not happy with who I had become. And
Mm,
part of it came from my own childhood. My father is no longer alive. He died very young, but he was very harsh on me. And again, part of it is going back to the India, just the sheer size of that country and how you've
mm.
got to work so hard to get to anywhere.
Yeah.
And he was his only questions to me would be like, did you come first in your class? Were you the class topper? Or you came
Mm,
second? Who was first? Why weren't you first? I'll never forget when I got my first job at Oxygen Media with Karen Bronzo, and I called my father. And it had been 3 years, I don't know, countless interviews, such a hard journey. I remember calling him and saying, I've got my first job. He said, how much are you making? And I remember it was, I think, $55,000 a year or maybe 60. And he said, is that it? He says, do you know your cousin makes $250,000? And
mm.
she was a professor in Detroit or Dallas or somewhere. And she's an American citizen, had grown up here. Like that's the first thing he said to me. So
Mm.
that was how I grew up, and while you try very hard to separate yourself and who you should be from what has been drummed into you and
Sure.
so it was a really, but I was so grateful. And I'm not saying that I have completely gotten to a better place with any of that. I probably revert back into my terrible habits, but I do try and be much more thoughtful about, and not just doing it to do it or not just to tick a box, but to really think about, wow, that must have taken that person a lot of work to get this project to where it is. So, how can I make sure that I'm giving them? And sometimes in our day to day, we are so busy, it is so crazy. You're going from meeting to Zoom that, it's easy to forget. But that is I have, like, as I said, many flaws. That is one of my flaws, and I'm trying very hard to work on it. And I really appreciated both sides of my life coming to me with the same thought that I wasn't
Yeah.
focusing on what was good.
Gosh, I think that's so powerful and talk about a true work life intersection, being able to take one lesson in one place and apply it in both areas. And, I think that's such good insight to give business leaders because let's face it, we're living in this time when, I forget who said it, but the pace of change has never been this fast and it will
Mhm.
never be this slow again. And so there's always this urgency to keep going, keep innovating, be better, faster, all of this. And being able to take a step back and appreciate the process that it took to get there and the things that are working and we have to really kind of be constantly recalibrating to make space for that. I think that's something that I get to do with business leaders is actually make the space to do some of that work because it's really it's just things are going so fast. And I love the looking back at you. I mean, how could you not be someone who's just
Go,
like, just
go.
always going ahead. Yeah, like, that's just you use the word at some point in this conversation, you use the word fire when you're describing yourself, and, like, you are fire, like, so it's really hard to be fire and to, like, kinda pull back at times and be like, "Okay, actually, great job on this,"
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
because you're
yeah.
going full steam ahead, and I really appreciate you just being the kind of leader who is intuitive enough to sense that something's not right and to then interrogate that and
Yeah.
interrogate self and to really bring that self-awareness and then work to shift your behaviors, knowing that you will never be perfect, but that you can certainly try and you can do that in a way that's not just trying at work, but actually is now trying at home.
Yeah.
And that's where real learning happens when we
I
don't
mean,
just
I knew,
compartmentalize.
yeah, I knew that I would lose my daughter in some way,
Yeah.
that if I hadn't fixed it or course corrected. And again, we constantly, as a teenager, we squabble a lot. And the one other thing I'll say, and I don't know if it resonates for you or for other people who may be listening, but I do feel like as women leaders, as women professionals, there's just a lot of pressure that I think is self inflicted on wanting to be an exceptional professional in terms of driving results and bottom line success, but also trying to be a nurturing,
Mm.
compassionate leader. And sometimes those two things can be at odds. The more senior I've gotten in my career, our business is going through a lot of transformation. I am asked by senior management to make a lot of decisions that are very, very difficult on an individual basis. I would say misfortune of being on the front lines when we've got to make difficult decisions about hiring and firing. You
Yeah.
know, that is one of the hardest things you will ever do, I think, in professional life.
Yeah.
And that has a real impact, right? I mean, you're the face of it. There's a lot of anger towards you. And I think as women leaders, we we want very much to be compassionate and nurturing as well as effective.
Yeah.
And I sometimes, again, this is my own experience. It may not hold for all women
Yeah.
leaders. It may not hold for all male leaders. I'm not making this about gender, but I know that that is my particular cross to bear.
Mm.
And I think that really I find the hardest to balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm so happy you said that because it is difficult to balance and not a lot of people talk about it because especially when you're representing the business and when your job is to secure the interests of the business, you know what your role is in that and you can do your very best to do the hirings and firings and all the things that have to happen from a place of compassion, but it doesn't change the fact that you know you're impacting people's lives.
Yeah.
And it's a really tough cross to bear, so to speak. And again, I think there's not enough conversation there's not enough visibility into how challenging that is.
Yeah.
Um, and so with the hundreds of thousands of people who've been laid off in the last,
Yeah.
several years, there's for folks that aren't folks that don't have the visibility into what goes on behind the scenes and then what goes on in the hearts of the people who are having to do it. Um, I find that it's like, I think about it for many people, it's like a breakup with no closure. Like there's no
Mhm.
closure. And I think the more that leaders are willing to talk about how challenging this is, the more it can maybe be healing in some ways to folks that feel like they don't have the closure
Thought,
that they need.
there was no thought put in. No,
Yeah.
and I've tried very hard to stay connected even to individuals that were impacted and to try and help as much as I can in every way, in any way.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a particularly challenging time for our business and for leaders, and survivor's guilt is a real thing.
Yeah. Oh,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
and so I think we can only just keep hoping to learn and do the best that we can.
Yeah. Well, listen, Pooja, I have loved this conversation, and we're going to close with just some rapid fire questions. So here we go. Are you ready for it?
I am
Okay. Fill in the blank. Growth is
hard,
Hmm. What is the very first thing you realized you were good at as a child?
hard work.
Hmm. What was your first job?
I used to work at a fair manning a game stall.
Hmm. Who was the best boss you ever had?
Oh, that is so hard. I did not. Life? I don't know. I have to think of a name. I can't think of a name. cannot
Well,
think of
you've
an
done so much name dropping today. People know you love them.
oh,
That's a
oh
good
my God. All of those were my bosses and my supervisors. And yeah, all you're right. I already answered the question
I love it. Um, what's something you're trying to learn right now?
of how to learn.
Mm. Hmm. What's
I have
something yeah,
forgotten how
keep
to,
going.
I have forgotten how to learn. I don't have
Interesting.
time in my life to focus, I feel. So I am trying to make this year be about learning something new. So I'm thinking of learning, going back to statistics and math
Mhm.
because I was not very good at math growing up, but I have to learn how to learn.
Ooh, I love that. What a great challenge to go back to statistics. You
Yeah.
really do like to pick the hard road.
Yeah.
What's something you're trying to unlearn?
Ooh. Being insecure.
Mm. Yeah. You wouldn't be surprised. That's one of, I feel like, the top things that comes up when I ask this question. Name a book or a movie that changed your life.
Ooh. Uh, I should have prepped for this question. I cannot think of a movie. I saw Sound of Music 30 times, but I don't, I don't
Oh
know.
my gosh.
I
Can I
don't know.
tell you Sound of Music
I,
is one of my all-time favorites, and I will go as far as to say it did change my life.
with your life. Yes. Actually, no, I do have a book that I loved very, very much. It's called Being Mortal,
Oh,
Mortal,
yeah.
M-O-R-T-A-L by Atul Gawande. That book
Yeah.
changed my life and it changed my, how I have processed death in my life
Mhm.
because I lost both my parents. So that was one of the most, that was just the most supportive book I have ever read. I
Yes,
recommend it highly to everyone who is living.
it's on my list. Actually, one of my dearest friends is reading it right now, and,
Oh, wow. Very
yeah,
powerful. It's very
yes,
powerful.
yes. When growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
Hmm. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't. I think I am already on to what the
Mm,
next thing has to be. So it's a good question so that I can try and incorporate that a little bit more.
that's why I ask it. Um, when growth feels hard, how do you take care of yourself?
um, when I would say exercise, nature, and meditation.
Mm,
The three like trifecta works every time. Every time.
brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
What would your 8-year-old say? Well, sorry. What would your 8-year-old self say about the life you're living now?
Enjoy it more.
Mm, love it. And last question. When you grow all the way up and you leave this life, what
Mhm.
is it that you hope to congratulate yourself on?
She left she left her world better than she found it.
Mm, that's beautiful. Pooja, you are remarkable. Truly, truly remarkable.
Love these questions.
And
I'm glad I didn't know what the questions were. They were really
well,
good.
you answered them beautifully. And I love this conversation. Thank you for your vulnerability, for your sharing part of your life with us. There's so much more I know. But I'm so blessed to know you now and grateful for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate how thoughtful this process is and what a wonderful just companion, a podcast companion you are. So
No,
thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Such a pleasure. All right, y'all. Well, we will see you soon. Talk later.